Layne Norton is at it again, but I have to give credit where credit is due because he finally got the knack of saying the super scientific word meta-analyses somewhat smoothly.
We have meta-analyses,
which is much better than before.
A meta-analysis.
Amazingly, this guy has gained over 100,000 followers since the last time I did a video on his expletive-riddled rants on diet and health topics. At least now he can sometimes go as much as 10 seconds without having to do a jump cut because he lost his train of thought, which is much better than the old days. Unfortunately, the content isn't much better, but he did manage to set me up to talk about several aspects of fasting and a low-carb diet, so I think it's worth addressing his nutty rants once again.
The one man who made a difference 5 times before is about to make a difference again. Here we go again. Again.
Blood sugar matters, not calories. The calorie thing, can we just say right here, right now, whoever's listening, between you and I, we're done with calories.
She made a lot of claims about it being an outdated theory. No, it is not outdated. The plethora of research data supports it.
Okay, I'll bite, Layne. What's your plethora of proof?
I would not like to think that a person would tell someone he has a plethora and find out that that person has no idea what it means to have a plethora.
Meta-analyses of studies where they look at low carb versus high carb, equating calories and protein.
Oh no, it's another meta-analyses, and I'd hardly call that a plethora since it's really just one study. And this is basically just like an opinion piece in this case. While meta-analyses can be a great thing, in practice they often just cherry pick the studies that show a certain point of view, just like this one. Don't worry though, as usual I have plenty of studies to draw on, and also look at all opposing viewpoints as best as I can. I actually had to do some electronic fiddling because he pulled a bit of a J.J. Abrams, and he blurted out meta-analyses and then quickly and quietly said they were all isocaloric and that they all had the same exact protein in the diet. That means it's all the same calories and all the same protein levels, and we generally expect, at least in the short term, I mean my goodness, that if we're doing a study for 3 weeks with the same calories, we're going to get the same weight loss, if any. In reality, people actually eat far fewer calories on a low-carb diet when they're not locked up on a metabolic ward eating some cooked-up processed kibble that has these macro ratios that don't even exist in nature. So if you believe in calories in, calories out at all, then you must believe that a low-carb diet is always better for weight loss. You really have no other choice. And if you understand that and you still deny it, then you're just dishonest. In fact, you also burn more calories when you eat low carb. Many studies have shown this is true, and it is probably due to enhanced mitochondrial health. Even Brad Hall, the 1-week study master who's paid to hate low carb and who produces most of the studies that Norton presents, has finally conceded this effect is real. For example, in a Chinese study a while back, it was shown that for each 10% of carbohydrates in the diet, people burned 50 fewer calories a day. So if you're having 70% carbs, you're going to burn 350 fewer calories per day. That's like a pound a week, almost. I'd also add that in practice, what's the chance you will really eat as much protein on an isocaloric diet with plant food compared to keto foods like meat? At least if we're talking about real foods and not whatever kibble they feed these poor people. Zero chance, that's what. The protein quality is also lower So you will lose more lean tissue if you diet on a high carb diet.
And then the next part is, well, it's about hormone health. Which hormones and how? You notice that they never actually tell you which hormones. It's always just like this nebulous, it tells you nothing about hormonal health. Now, the hormone they're usually referring to is insulin.
Yes, there's more than one hormone, but approximately 0% of fitness influencers seem to realize that insulin and cortisol are intimately linked together. You can't stimulate one without a response from the other. Cortisol is called the stress hormone, but what it really does is make your body provide energy, usually as glucose. When you are fasted, then this process is safe, but when insulin is also high, you end up having to use lean tissue to do this. And the end result will be higher blood sugar and damaged collagen. And of course, another response from insulin is your blood sugar is going to increase. As your chronic insulin levels go up from constantly smashing insulin spikes, after years you're going to get into a state where both insulin and cortisol are chronically high, and that's how it is for most people today, about 90% of them. This leads to constant swings in blood sugar and in appetite, and that's why people get hangry. This also leads to wasting of lean tissue and a fatty liver as well. That means your growth hormone levels will decline with time, and so will your body's ability to regenerate itself, because this all comes from the liver. This also leads to thymic involution and immunosenescence and many other issues. This is called hypercortisolism, and it can happen from disease, but it's also what happens from years and years of a bad diet full of grain, veg oil, and fructose. Thankfully, a lower carb diet does much less to cause these issues, and fasting can actually reverse them. It makes cortisol safe during the fast by lowering insulin, which means you're going to generate more ketones instead. It repairs the liver. It gets fat out of the liver to use as sugar. It increases growth hormone to regenerate organs. And once the fast is done with, since the insulin goes down 60% in just 24 hours, then the cortisol is also going to fall. And if you eat right after breaking the fast, you can keep it down permanently. In addition to that, fasting balances all your other hormones. If your liver is damaged, you cannot activate growth hormone, so it becomes useless. For men, testosterone goes down while fasting, but the Leydig cell activity goes dramatically up. And when the fast breaks, your T levels also go up, and all of this testosterone that's created is going to start out as free testosterone. So if you just worked out, then that testosterone is going to go bind to your muscles. For women, it quickly removes damaged estrogen molecules, which cause a lot of problems with the skin. And it repairs the liver, which will help even postmenopausal women to have a better estrogen status. For men, obesity robs your T levels by producing sex hormone binding globulin, and fasting is also the best way to resolve this issue. Otherwise, you're just never going to have good testosterone levels, because when you're obese, you're just constantly getting rid of your testosterone.
Low carb seems to have an advantage at lowering blood glucose more quickly in like the first few weeks. But in the long term, there doesn't appear to be many differences.
The problem here is that he's still talking about isocaloric studies. If you eat a low calorie, high carb diet, which is magically protein equivalent to a low carb diet, your blood sugar will go down over time as long as you're eating fewer calories than you were before. But that's a big if. And in the real world, you not only eat fewer calories on a low carb diet, but it is much easier to control blood sugar. In fact, it is very hard not to get improvements if you don't eat carbs, which are sugar. Duh. Protein also releases peptide YY in the gut, which not only suppresses hunger, but also directly attacks candida in the gut. If you know anything about antibodies, you probably know Y is a very common shape for them. And yes, peptide YY is literally an antibody against candida, as well as a signal suppress appetite. And essentially it seems the candida themselves encourage the appetite, and this reduces the appetite. Fasting is even better here because you not only stop taking in sugar, but you also dump it into your body from the liver as it removes glycogen and liver fat to make glucose and ketones so that the body and brain can use this during the fast. That makes the liver better able to store glucose and glycogen later, and that is the true secret to metabolic health. And it's also going to get rid of those stupid candida because they can't live without sugar in your intestinal tract.
So for a lot of people, a low carb diet is actually easier to adhere to, and it's a perfectly good reason to do a low carb diet.
Wow, that may actually be the first reasonable thing I've ever heard Layne Norton say in his life. Now that I think of it though, he's probably trying to say stick to the particular diet, which if that's true, then what's the point? Who cares that you stick to this particular diet? But the truth is that low carb makes it much easier to eat a reasonable amount and keep from binging. That's just all there is to it. In fact, a Chinese study a while back essentially cured binge eating in all of its participants by giving them a low carb diet. That gets both insulin and cortisol under control, and that's what drives hunger and binging. That's why the silly processed chow isocaloric diet studies, where people are forced to eat a specific diet for a short period of time of a couple of weeks, are just totally meaningless. Not to mention that short experiments are usually meaningless anyway. In the real world, pretzels, donuts, and candy are around every corner, and your coworkers are probably shoving them in your face 2 times a day. If you're constantly stimulating your insulin, it's very easy to get carried away.
You gotta strap me to a tree.
Oh. Really? Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. Literally a tree.
When you're under stress, it also releases cortisol, and that makes matters even worse.
You make more growth hormone. Do you know what boosts growth hormone the most is fasting?
Yeah, acutely for a short period of time. Also, growth hormone, not anabolic.
There's a few comical things in here. First off, the only time growth hormone will actually build anything is right after a fast. So who cares if it's short term? Second, short-term studies show no muscle growth from growth hormone, but if that's true, why does every Mr. Olympia swear by it? I highly doubt they would spend tens of thousands of dollars per year or even $100,000 a year on it if it did little or nothing. I would guess that it works in the long term, and that's why long-term studies are incredibly important. And growth hormone will lead to the creation of new cells, and that may possibly even include new muscle fibers. Unfortunately, that is impossible to test in a non-destructive manner, and the NIH just doesn't care about bodybuilding or muscle size. But regardless, it's clear it has some kind of effect. Something else that's seldom mentioned is that fasting gives a hyperinsulinic response to food as well, but don't be scared, this is when you're supposed to have a hyperinsulinic response. And that's another favorite of elite level bodybuilders, and probably for a reason. If you work out, then break a long fast, I can say from personal experience that this works very well, and I've gained a lot of strength that way, and I had lost most of my strength when I was way overweight. There's simply no time in your life after birth you're going to build more cells than after a fast, and I would not be surprised at all if it can actually build new muscle cells too. Add in some supplemental leucine to this meal, and it will boost the muscle protein synthesis effect even higher. It's important to realize it's mainly the meal after you work out that's important to determine how much muscle protein synthesis you're going to have. I found it very helpful to work out this way, and I highly recommend giving it a try. Alright, we're going to look at one more nugget of Layne's amazing wisdom, and then I'm going to call it a night. Let's hope it's something good for a change.
Intermittent fasting and autophagy debunked. So this study was looking at alternate day fasting compared to normal calorie restriction, compared to alternate day fasting with no calorie restriction, looking at fat loss, lean mass, a bunch of metabolic stuff, and markers of autophagy.
Oh, now he's coming after fasting itself. Once again, though, we get another goofy study of eating patterns people would never do in real life. Nobody would ever eat double the food on the eating day in an alternate day fasting regimen. People tend to eat a little more, maybe 20 to 25%, but definitely not double. The next group was 150% of the normal diet, but every other day. This is also not what would happen in practice, which is 125% or so, maybe a bit less. If you wildly eat more carbs on your eating day, then of course you'll have worse results for sure. And the thing is, Layne is putting this like it's some proof that more calories are more bad. The thing is that when you fast like this, you're gonna eat fewer calories. That's all there is to it. The next group was cutting 25% of calories and eating every day. And here's the problem with that. This only works for a few weeks. Then people break the diet from increased ghrelin, which just goes up and up. It also slows the metabolism quickly as well. Just in the first week, it's already starting to slow. That's why this study only runs for 3 weeks, and that's why all of them run for 3 weeks. And a lot of these studies by Brad Hall are only for 1 week. Especially if they're trying to show that fasting or low carb is bad. And really 1 week is just totally pointless. Lately, protein-sparing modified fasting has become a fad again. This is where you eat very lean protein and close to zero carbs to quickly lose weight. It will shed weight very quickly for a few weeks, but after a week it becomes very miserable, and it only gets worse as you go on. After a couple of months, your metabolism slows down dramatically, and people almost always rebound and gain the weight back very, very quickly. This shows all the problems of dieting in compressed form. Yes, you can lose a little weight, but you slow down your metabolism and you increase the hunger hormone ghrelin dramatically. So the more you lose, the more likely it is you'll gain it all back and then some. In the Minnesota starvation experiment, that is exactly what happened. And in that case, the men were all prisoners who could not increase calories above baseline. It was just physically impossible. They were prisoners. They still eventually gained more fat the more they dieted. And in the end, they still went way over their original weight simply by slowly increasing back to their normal calories, where they had averaged about 154 pounds and gone up to 164 or something like that. And this is in a controlled environment with no possibility of cheating or binging. So they did exactly what all of these gurus tell you to. They slowly increased their calories, about 100 a week, and they still regained all the weight back by the time they got back to their normal calorie range. And if they could have binged like you on the street could do, then the results would have been even worse. Just keep in mind all these bodybuilder guys are on special substances that make their dieting extremely easy. Thankfully, neither of those things happen with fasting. Ghrelin actually goes down when you fast, and people will usually say you get much less hungry after the second day, though sometimes it does for me, but most of the time it has not. And your metabolism actually goes up from short fasts of 36 to 96 hours. And this is repeatable over and over again for your whole life. In animal studies, that's exactly what they do. They fast animals back to back for their entire life. They would have a mouse eating every other day, one meal. And for a mouse, that's like doing a 7-day fast almost. And they experience nothing but benefits. They're far healthier and younger looking than the control animals. And the main thing that they avoid is cancer. In humans, a 6-month alternate day fasting experiment showed great improvement compared to a group that was dieting in the normal manner, and much greater compliance because these people were not locked up in prison, unlike in these silly studies that Layne Norton provides us. They all lost fat without losing any muscle, while the dieters mostly lost muscle, or at least about half. In fact, the fasting group put on a small amount of extra muscle on average, even though they did not change their exercise routines from baseline. It's really the long term where dieting fails, and losing a large amount of weight requires very long term dieting. If you're 100 pounds overweight, you're going to be dieting for a couple of years, even if you lose 1 pound a week. That's why guys like Layne Norton can't point to one person that they've helped to lose 100 pounds or more and has kept it off for years. If they could, it would be all over their site all day, every day. But they keep spewing nonsense advice anyway. On the other hand, there's endless success stories of people losing 100 pounds, 200, or even more through fasting and keeping it off. And people have also lost a lot of weight through a low-carb diet, though I think fasting and a low-carb diet would be better if they went together if you're trying to lose weight. Also keep in mind that many fitness influencers are on PEDs that essentially double the metabolic rate, and they also block the bad effects of cortisol, which is a little known property. This makes it amazingly easy to get into shape, and it negates the biggest downside of carbs for weight loss. The ones who do this are nothing short of frauds, and they should be locked up for all the harm they do. Of course, we know Layne never did such things. He even sued a guy over making an accusation about PEDs, and we all know that completely proves he's innocent for sure. On top of all that, Layne is looking pretty soft and puffy lately. His chest is kind of droopy and deflated. But don't tell him that. Characters like him are much easier to deal with when you don't challenge their ego.
Hey man, you know how Rambo 1, he was big with little puffy, and then Rambo 2, he got all shredded up? Yeah, that's kind of how you look right now. You more shredded than a Julian salad, man. And the tips? What? And the tips you got?
There's like the pineapple.
Give me that goddamn map.